Well, welcome back. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I did, and as always, it's great to be with you again. I thought today I would wear one of my old corduroy jackets. I hope it's not perceived as being out of fashion, but I guess you can tell we go back like that. We come from a time where we stay loyal to fashion trends that remind us of our youth and the good times. Anyway, welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend. I certainly did. And today I'm going to be speaking about something that I think is quite interesting. Personally, I find it fascinating. But most importantly, let's put my my perspectives and my views aside. I think this could be one of the most important conversations or teaching sessions for most people, men and women, but particularly for women. Now, let me start by prefacing today's conversation. This is not going to be a moral conversation. Now, if you're one of those who believes in morality, that's completely fine. This is not for you. Secondly, this is not a value judgment from my perspective. If you're one of those who believes in assigning judgment, always, again, not for you. This is real talk. And the reason I have decided to speak about this topic is because there is so much, in my opinion, so much BS believed, taught, and passed on to younger people. I'm going to give you a different perspective. I hope the perspective doesn't drive you away. I hope it enables you to go away and think and come back. Now, the conversation will, if I can, be spread across 2 or 3 sessions, because I think it is important. Now, without keeping you further, I'm going to be talking about cheating, infidelity, cheating, and more. But I'm going to focus on one aspect today, the whole concept of cheating, men cheating, and I'm going to address this from a man's perspective. Perhaps in the sessions that follow, or that follows this one, I will talk about infidelity, and then more. Now, again, to preface this conversation, this is not a right or a wrong interaction. This is not a moral conversation. This is an amoral conversation. You have to understand that. Now, let me define or put on the table 3 important words that I think will form what I will call a connecting thread across the sessions that I might do about the same topic. The first is trust. The second has to do with faith, and hence the term on being unfaithful. So one is trust, one is faith, or the lack of faith. The third is promises or vows, and the fourth is dishonesty. Now, all of those words play and find themselves within infidelity, cheating, and relationships. The reason this conversation is particularly important, especially for women, is as follows. Firstly, 70% or 80% of all the dissolution of relationships, now whether that be marriage or cohabitation or civil partnerships or just intimate relationships, are usually initiated by women. 70% and more. Now, this is not a number that is unique to the UK alone. The same numbers are applicable across the Western nations. The North American states or countries, Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, you have a similarity in results. Most people feel that the reason 7 out of 10 women leave is because there is something wrong with the men, or there is something the men are doing that is causing the women to leave, that women are actually reacting, and they don't see the filing of divorces or the separation decisions as the cause. They believe that that is an effect, and that the main cause is the man. Now, the antidote to that position is a simple one. The Office of National Statistics in the UK provides a lot of information about divorces and separations, the dissolution of relationships in the United Kingdom across, you might call it, family types. So we have what we call opposite sex relationships and same-sex relationships. In the UK, 70% of all same-sex relationships are female relationships. Of the 7 out of 10 that are female relationships, in 70% of those, the women are filing for separation. So this is not a man or woman decision. Women generally initiate the divorce or separation first, for whatever reason. Now, again, not a moral conversation. I'm not talking about reasons. I'm not talking about why. I am not passing blame. It is what it is. It's not even today's conversation. I mentioned that so you could understand how this perhaps could help women more than it does men, because most of the time, men do not leave. Now, with that said, and with that, you might say, initial preface, let's begin today's session. And I hope you accept this with an open heart and perspective. But let me start with a story. I think this story will crystallize at the core what I hope would be the lesson in what I'm suggesting to women about how to deal with difficulties that will arise irrespective of how great your relationship might be today. The bumblebee, for those of you who are familiar with the bumblebee is a very fascinating insect. I've always found it fascinating for a number of reasons, because I've always drawn motivation and insights and lessons from the life of a bumblebee. If you've seen a bumblebee, what you have in your mind is a picture. And when I use the word bumblebee, I would imagine what flashes in the screen of your mind is a picture of this beautiful looking insect. It may not be an insect, it might be a different term, classification that it falls under. It doesn't matter. But something that looks not too dissimilar from its fellow, I guess, cousins, bees and wasps, etc. The bumblebee, on the other hand, is a gentle one. According to the laws of aerodynamics, the bumblebee is not supposed to be able to fly. Now, this is important because everything in this world is governed by laws. According to the law of aerodynamics, the bumblebee is not supposed to be able to fly. The reason for that being it has very small wings compared to its oversized body. The size of its wings compared to its body has created a scenario where people are baffled as to how this small bee with tiny wings can fly. Human beings are the ones who understand the concept of aerodynamics and gravity and all the various laws. So we are puzzled, rightly so, because we have education. More importantly, because we know more, because we have information, because we have knowledge. The bumblebee, on the other hand, does not have the ability to comprehend like humans. It doesn't know that there is a law that exists out there that should stop it from flying. It is what we call intelligently ignorant. Therefore, it flies. Now, the words I want to keep in mind is intelligently ignorant. Women and ladies, one of the qualities you need if you want to have a successful long-term relationship is the quality of a bumblebee. The bumblebee does not go searching for information. The bumblebee does not go searching for knowledge. The reason is simple. Life has a way of giving you back what you look for. ASK. If you ask, you will find. If you knock, the door will be open. If you seek, ask and it shall be given unto you, rather. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open unto you. The bumblebee doesn't do either of those three things. It stays focused on its core purpose. Relationships are very, very, very strange, what I call mechanisms, systems, organisms. Sometimes they develop a life of their own. Unfortunately, along the way, there is a breakdown, whether you say a breakdown of trust or lack of faith, some people being unfaithful, whether you say breaking of promises or vows, it doesn't matter. But along the way, the word cheating or infidelity comes into the picture. Now, the first thing to understand is there is a difference between the modern concept of cheating and the traditional concept of cheating. There is also a difference between cheating from a man's perspective and cheating from a woman's perspective. In the West, we do not hear the perspective of men with regards to cheating. So most men and most women are inundated with a definition of cheating that unfortunately comes from the female lens, and for that reason causes more harm to female happiness, long-term survivability and success. What defines you, or what you define yourself by, places a limit on you. So if you define cheating in a very certain way, you will look at cheating and actions pertaining to cheating from the same perspective. So let me start as follows. Since the 1970s and since the 1960s, women have been sold almost a bill of goods. With the introduction from the early turn of the century of the likes of Coca-Cola, the likes of Hallmark, the likes of the various media organizations, Hallmark, Disney, DreamWorks, and all the great huge studios. They have created a scene and created this picture and narrative that as a woman, your peace of mind is the most important thing. That love is the most important thing. That it's important for the man to love you more than you love him. That's the concept women have. That you are supposed to be this beauty that this beast comes to rescue. And you are supposed to be this thing that he's willing to give his life for. And despite him being this beast, who's able to go out there and fight the dinosaurs and vultures and the dragons and the enemies and slay all of them, he can come back into the cave, and when he's within your presence, he's supposed to be like kryptonite. You are kryptonite to him, and he's supposed to come and submit to you and not cause you any pain and go against his instincts. The same instincts that enable him be successful, be able to provide and protect. For some reason that he should be able to tame those instincts and desires when it comes to you. That's the modern concept. The traditional concept, however, is a simple one. It goes back to a simple philosophy, which says human beings are an extension of the animal kingdom. We are mammals, and therefore our behaviors are not too dissimilar from mammals, and that men, generally speaking, are probably more likely to be more akin to animals than women. After all, depending on your school of thought, we come from the soil. The woman comes from the man. We're made from two different ingredients. Men are naturally, which is partly why men are more interested in things, dirty things, and soil and creation and building and all of that, compared to women. Women are more nurturing. Now, if you subscribe to the traditional approach to life and relationships, what you tend to have is a humility that comes with your ego. Your ego is placed in second place. Why? Because you understand the fallibility of animals, and you understand that animals will always be animals. When we look at the wild, we do not look at lions and tigers and wonder why they kill each other. We just simply say, well, shit happens. Now, in the same way and in the same manner, when we think about men, there is a school of thought amongst modern women that perceive men, that perceive modern men as something or things or an organism that is supposed to behave in a manner as a result of having more enlightenment and knowledge, but behave in a manner dissimilar to all of his history, ancestry line, and predecessors. The traditional approach, however, is to say we haven't really changed, and men have not necessarily really changed in 1,000 years, and that at the core our motivations are not too dissimilar. Now, this is partly why in the session that I did a few sessions ago, I think 2 sessions ago, I talked about the importance of recognizing a man's needs, that there are needs that we have as men that we are born with, there are needs that are seasonal, and there are needs that we cultivate along the way. And that if you understand the core needs, the ones we are born with, you succeed by focusing on changes at the margin, not changes at the foundation level, at the core level of the individual, or you might say at the basic level of the individual, because that's what I would term as a need that a person is born with. You focus on things at the margins. Now, at the margins you will have what we call cultivated needs, cultivated tastes, cultivated desires. You can work with that. You can manipulate that slowly and slightly and in a subtle manner. But you have to accept the core needs. Now, I've started with all of that to lay the foundations for what will be slightly a contentious proposal or position or perspective. But before I do so, before I go into the main thrust of my conversation, let me deal with the moral side very briefly. And I do so you can understand that that's not the purpose of this conversation. Morality has to do with what is good and what is bad, good and evil. But you can understand that one person's good is another person's evil. That's partly why I do not deal with morality, especially in my channels. It is what it is. But more importantly, women, generally speaking, when choosing men, they talk about the importance of a man who has integrity, who has good character. Here is the sad part. Women in the West have not been trained how to choose men based on their character. They have been taught and trained to choose men in a manner that is not consistent with history, that is not consistent with their long-term fulfillment and success or happiness. Women in the West have been taught to believe that they are like men. So it's almost like an inverse primitive way of selecting a mate. A woman looks at a man and she's looking at a man with the same traits as a man looks at a woman. She doesn't think about character, ability to provide, ability to protect, the priesthood type duties, and someone who actually can give her presence, which is how he professes his love. Instead, she thinks like a man, where she looks at physical attributes. Now, we know very much of what these physical attributes are. We talk about the 4 sixes or the 5 sixes: 6-pack, 6-figure bank account or salary, 6 foot tall, 6 inch, and the sixes continue. Most women, therefore, judge men on their looks, how they feel about him. They judge men based on humor, excitement, and character is pushed out of the picture. And unfortunately, in choosing a spouse or someone for long-term relationships, most women do not stop and say, is he a good person? Does he have good character? Is he founded properly? And here's what's sad. You start off dating without using character as a defining attribute. And then eventually you progress the relationship and, forgive me for this, and you get to the point where you move it or you transition into a long-term relationship, whether that be cohabitation, civil partnership, or marriage. And then suddenly you believe that just because she said a few vows, a few sentences, or suddenly just because you decided, or both of you decided, that we would like to spend time with each other, you believe naively that character will suddenly reappear or re-emerge as a foundational quality, despite it not being used as a pre-selection quality at the start. In other words, you're asking men to behave in a way different to how they were when they met you. Or, put it differently, you were judging men in a manner different to the same criteria that you used to judge him when you met him. Now, that's a big issue, and I'm going to talk about this. But let me deal with the issue of character very briefly. So women can understand that there are a few things you have to perhaps start correcting in order for you to be able to say, I made the right decisions. Character is born, firstly, out of your belief of what's good or bad. But here is the important part. Your character, from your character, you form your beliefs. Sometimes vice versa, but you form your beliefs. Your beliefs will determine what you put as a hierarchy or what you assemble as a hierarchy of importance or value, which is where values come from. I value this more than that and that more than that. So when we talk about our values, they come from our beliefs. Our beliefs come from what we believe in morality, right or wrong, and that's where our character is forged from. Our values will create what we believe is our ethics. And our ethics will determine our actions. Our actions will reinforce our character. Now, the reason I've given you that is simply to give women something to keep in mind when it comes to men. If you can keep that connectivity, you will find that it becomes easy for you to determine whether the person you're vetting to give yourself to is the right person. Now, the reason I went through all of that process is a simple one. If you make the decisions without looking at character, then you cannot make the decision in the future of judgment based on a lack of character. It's really that simple. Now, it's also important to understand that when women talk about cheating, and this is where I begin today's session in more depth, when women talk about cheating, they come from the perspective of perhaps either a break of trust, a breach of an agreement, perhaps a broken promise. Sometimes they come from a perspective of perhaps new data or knowledge that has come to them about intimacy with another person, another woman, which they were not aware of. Granted, no problem with that, granted. But the reason I started with character is to say as follows. Every man will be tested for 3 things. And women, if you can understand this next few sentences, your understanding of men and the likelihood that a person's behavior will cause so much damage in your psyche to the point whereby your life and your happiness is deterred and disturbed, and you go on a detour of madness as a result of someone's behavior, is very low. If you understand this, character is important, but every man will be tested for his character. And we will face, there are three tests we usually face. The first is the test for power, the test for money, and the test of our loins, or sex. Now the third is where today's conversation really focuses on. But the point being that the same energy that we can use for creativity is the same energy we generate and we transfer towards sexual exploits and desires and pursuits. So if his energy is channeled towards money and power, the same energy can be channeled towards sex and his loins. So every man is only as faithful as the tests that he has overcome, the frequency of those tests, the magnitude of those tests, and the intensity of the test. We have heard that therefore, in order for you to say a man has got character, there has to be evidence, tangible or intangible, that he has actually withstood said tests. One way, or what I call a heuristic, or a shortcut to determine that, is age. A man who is 25 cannot have gone through the tests required for his character, because he is still too young. 35 is the timeline, and perhaps I'll talk about this in a secondary session, but 35 is an important timeline, primarily for a number of reasons. Number one, he would have had enough time to pursue his dreams and goals, pursue his purpose, pursue his financial aspirations, and providing he delays living with a woman, starting a family, getting married, at least until 30, and then from 30 to 35 beginning his journey of actually becoming somebody from the perspective of revealing and unleashing to the world that vision he has or that purpose. You will find that if a man has not gone through the phase of manhood, and he hasn't actually been tested in the frame of what it means to be a man, he doesn't know. So he makes promises to you based on what he believes you want to hear. 35 is a good age where it starts. It doesn't end, it begins. That's when the tests really come, because at 35, all things remaining equal, he's come into his, you might say, unique skills, knowledge, attitude, ability to create, solve problems, and therefore money becomes a possibility. Through his skills and networks and association, power becomes a possibility. And where there is money and power, it means he can afford beauty and youth and fertility from women, and therefore women find him desirable. Lots of women choose men at a young age, but these are men who, at the early age, have nothing else to offer to women. So a man who is 25 and a woman who is 25, in terms of the value exchange or value proposition both bring to the table, the woman has a much higher value than he does, because all he has at 25 is potential and nothing else. He has to wait till 35 or 40 to see if he can convert that potential into reality. She, on the other hand, has the wealth with her. Why? Because men value beauty, youth, fertility. Men do not really value as much, or during the first instance, your education as a woman, your money as a woman, your success as a woman. We're visual first. And then other things come as add-ons. Now, the reason I say this is a simple one. Most of the time, women are choosing men when their value in the sexual marketplace or in the relationship marketplace is much higher than the man. And therefore, they are judging a man who is perhaps untested, and therefore likely to fail the test. Now, understand something. I'm not suggesting that men who are below 35 do not have good character. No. And I'm not saying men who are above 35 are the ones with the most character. No. I'm saying that a man is only as honorable and a man is only as faithful as the opportunities that he has been presented and triumphs over based on his character. Temptations come to test your character. The younger you are, the less temptations you've actually experienced. Why? Because those temptations do not come when you have nothing. Those temptations come usually at your most vulnerable, which is usually when you have the most power or the most wealth or the most access to beautiful, attractive women. So when a woman says, I'm dating this guy and he's always going to be faithful, well, he hasn't been tested, or he may have been tested in every single area. But more importantly, and this is where we get into the concept of men being faithful as the opportunities they have and the value of those opportunities. But in any case, let me not digress too far. Let me bring you back to the point I was trying to make. From your character, you have your beliefs, you have your values, you have your ethics, and you have your actions. And all of those reinforce your character. If you are not formed, in other words, if you're still very young, then there is a higher possibility that you're more likely to fall at the wrong time. Now, for every man, our word is the most important thing. So, and this is where I start to go into the conversation about what women define as cheating and what men define as cheating. Now, let me start with the following statements. Men and women are not the same. We're not equal. We therefore see things differently. Men would run our decision-making process through our intellectual faculty, far more so than women do. We're more logical in our approach because we use our reasoning ability first. Women, on the other hand, tend to use their sensory faculty, primarily feelings. They still have the ability to use the intellectual faculty, but women are more the emotional of the two groups. Men are more the logical of the two groups. So, from a woman's perspective, women define cheating as follows. A man, she believes to be, let me define differently. Women define cheating as follows. If a man who is in a relationship with a woman gets into any form of intimacy with another woman, whether that intimacy be defined on the emotional level, on the physical level, or the spiritual level, that is considered cheating if it's done behind closed doors. In other words, she doesn't know or she didn't know. But even if she didn't know, it's still considered as cheating from a woman's perspective. So, generally speaking, women would define it as having sex, having any form of sexual encounter, having any form of intimacy, whether that be words of affirmation, words of love and endearment, buying flowers, whatever physical activities that the man takes or steps he takes outside of his union with the woman in question is seen as cheating. But at the core, it has to do with emotional, physical intimacy. Now, I have no issues with that definition. The only problem is that definition does not apply to men, all things remaining equal. And here's the reason. In selecting a mate, a man chooses a woman based on different standards. We don't choose women the way women choose men. I said this earlier, that we're more visual. So we choose women based on a criteria that is slightly different to what women would choose men based on. So women, when it comes to cheating, generally judge men through the lens of what they choose men for and how they choose men. It's the same as giving someone your love language. Here is perhaps where women can have a different perspective of how to deal with what will be a very likely encounter. And if you're not one of those, you are an exception to the rule, but a very likely encounter in your relationship, which is cheating, infidelity, and more. But here is an important thing to keep in mind. From a man's perspective, a man cheats firstly by not telling the truth. That's the first. That's the first. His word should be his bond. Now, I go back to the word of character and integrity. A man's word and himself should be the same, which is partly why various writers, if we go back to the books of antiquities, it says, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father, meaning my Father and I are one. Integrity, we are the same. The ancient writer says, and from the books of Judaism and even Islam and Christianity, the first commandment was as follows: Hear, O Israel. Now, Israel meaning those who wrestle with God, which means everyone. Hear, O Israel, the Lord. The Lord our God is one. First commandment. Before he moves on to describe love your God and then love other people. But the first pre-qualification is integrity. One. Which is why those who study theology will tell you that when God speaks, he becomes subject to his word. That God is sovereign until he speaks. When he speaks, his word actually rules over his, you might say, his supreme position. So because he cannot go against his word. His word and himself are one. If you go back to the ancient times, when a king speaks, he cannot, because when he speaks, his word is law. He cannot go against his words. Now there's a funny, I digress, but this is important. There is a funny story of a king many years ago who made a declaration, a proclamation that said that anyone who did a certain thing or crime will be stoned publicly. And in this particular kingdom, whenever someone was stoned, they had big rocks. Unfortunately for this king, his son committed the crime. And he understood. His scribes and the wise sages came over and said to him, you are the king. Your word should be law. You cannot backtrack, even though your son is the one who's committed the crime. So he sent his wise men away to come up with a clever way so that he could not break his word, but so he could still carry on with what was supposed to be the proclamation or the declaration and having it fulfilled. Now, one of the wise people came back to him with an important and an interesting perspective. It was as follows. You said anybody who does that crime should be stoned. The king said yes. The wise sage said, but you did not define the size of the stones. You simply said they should be stoned. So we will gather the stones that we would normally use. We will break those stones into very small pieces, so small that it would take 10 to 15 times the time to actually stone the entire stones on your son. But here's the key part. We will stone him as per your law, but the pieces will be so small that whilst they might harm him, they will not kill him. The king's words and the king are one. Integrity. So character comes from integrity. A man cheats when he breaks his words. Now here's an important part. If he doesn't promise explicitly, it doesn't mean that he has broken his words. Very important statement. And I'm going to perhaps use the most useful example. Women make a mistake of saying, well, we got married and we took our vows. Well, you make a vow to God and you make a promise to the person. So the question is, has he broken his vow to his God? In any case, let me make it very clear. The marriage vows, the marriage being the preeminent evidence of union, the marriage vows have no response and have no reference to infidelity or cheating. It just simply says for better or for worse, till death. Let me say that again. The typical response given by women about why they have decided to leave annul, destroy their families, let go, move on, is because they say, well, he broke the wedding vows. Granted, he broke the wedding vows, but the wedding vows say nothing about infidelity or cheating. So, if you choose to break your relationship or your marriage based on the silly reference to him breaking his wedding vows, that is not a good enough reason, because your vows did not state, thou shalt not cheat. And your vows did not state, thou shalt not have any form of interaction other than what is described in the vow with another woman. It doesn't state that. That's the first. So, if he says something to you with his words, and he goes against his words, granted, he's breached the terms of what was agreed. In other words, you sit down with someone and you discuss things. The mistake women make, 99% of these women or women I've met make the same mistake, is you do not sit down and negotiate and address all the possible areas that you will face as a couple over time. You do not negotiate, you do not communicate, and you do not, most importantly, ask him to state his position on said matters. So you cannot say he's gone against his words because he never uttered his words. Now let me go back. This is important. And I understand many people are not necessarily of a faith-based mindset, but I think this is important. If you read through the books of antiquities, and if you go through Judaism and Islam, and if you go through Christianity, one of the things you find out very, very fast is how little speaking explicitly that is done by God. And let me say that again. God speaks very, very sparingly, because he understands that when he says something, heaven and earth will pass away, but not one word will pass away. He is limited by his words, so he says very little, very little. Men, we are very similar in our nature to our Creator, so we usually say very little. A woman's role, therefore, is to get us to speak, get us to verbalize and vocalize in words, so that the moment we speak, our sovereignty is then limited by what we say. So if I come to you and I say to you, as long as we live, I would never have any sexual relations with another woman. I will only love you. I will not have sex. I will not have any intimate feelings. I will not have any casual fling. I will not have any interactions. I will not buy any woman any flowers as long as we live. If I break those words, I am then limited by my words, meaning as long as we live. So your role as a woman is to get me to speak, because once I've spoken, remember, if you find a man of character and integrity, he and his words are one. So you can take his words to the bank. Now, this is, in my opinion, powerful stuff. If you go back in ancient times, and it even applies as British subjects, when the Brits colonized most of the world, Queen Elizabeth, or the Queen at the time, did not have to travel with her troops. She sent ambassadors. And whenever there was a place that was conquered, an ambassador reigned in that particular location. The ambassador was a representative of the British system and came with the power. The same principle applied during the Roman period, whereby Rome was the headquarters state, city, country, whatever you want to call it, but whenever they traveled, they would send a governor, and the governor had the same authority as the king, who was resided back in Rome. His word went ahead of him, and his word was as good as himself, which is partly why most of the kings or queens did not have to travel. All you needed was the word that was said. Hence, the story that says, your servant is sick, the master is coming, and the servant says, no, you do not have to come. Just say the word. I am a servant of Rome, and I can say to my people, go. The moment I say go, I carry in me the weight of Caesar. Now you say the word. You don't have to come and travel to heal my servant. Say the word, because your word is yourself, integrity, character, oneness. Every man has a word. If you haven't been able to get your husband, your partner, your boyfriend to say the word, then you should not and cannot use the word cheating, infidelity in conversation about him, of him, or to him, irrespective of the actions taken. Your role as a woman is to draw out that word. That's the first. Now the second, resources. Resources. A man's primary responsibility is provision and protection. In the West, because we've developed peace over 70, 80 years, we can walk down the high streets relatively safely, and therefore the need to protect is not at the, you might say, at the top of the pyramid as it once used to be, because we've outsourced the protection to other, you might say, institutions, public institutions. The police, the Navy, our defense system provides that as a service to every one of us. But provision, we still provide. However, most men provide the natural provision, but also we provide the protection indirectly through provision. For example, if you lived in parts of London, and you've lived in various parts of London, you will come to an agreement that the various parts of London have a different crime rate. The reason primarily being that the demographics of people across all of London varies. There are very affluent and posh areas of London, and there are less affluent and posh areas. You tend to get more, you might say, misconduct and disorderly behavior in some areas compared to other areas. So if I am wealthy, I can gift a woman the gift of protection by just making sure that I provide a house, a home for her in the safest part of London. It might be the most expensive part of London, but indirectly she benefits from the provision, but also the protection, because the caliber of people who will be found around that area tend to be more like-minded. Now, I say this for a reason. Go back to resources. Therefore, a man cheats with his resources, not with his loins. If I am married to you, and I am taking the resources that should be provided to the family or to you, and I am providing something comparable, equal, or close to what is provided for you, then that is cheating. In other words, I am taking and I'm providing, I'm gifting a woman other than my wife or my partner or my spouse or my significant other or my beloved. I'm giving another woman the same level of dedication that I'm giving to you. Provision, protection, the priestly duties, and my presence. That is cheating. So if I bought a house for her, similar to what you have, that's cheating. I'm taking the resources that should be for you and your offsprings and my descendants that you've created, and I'm giving it to another person, another woman. If I am willing to give my life for her to the same level and instinctively as I would you, that is cheating. If I am willing to share my vision as a priest, this is my priestly duties, and communicate my vision, my destiny, my focus, my dreams, my goals, such that she has a blueprint of the same vision that you have, that is cheating. Remember, two cannot walk together except they agree. There is one vision. I am the leader. You are the cheerleader. If I bring in another cheerleader, and that cheerleader is brought into the union without your knowledge and even without your approval, but I do so in a hybrid fashion by giving her the same vision, that is cheating. If I do so in a different location, but she understands my dreams and she can articulate my dreams as carefully as you can, that is cheating. The priestly and priesthood is cheating. If I take that forward and I gift her my presence to the same extent and to the same intensity as I give you, such that I bring into the world another offspring. In other words, I've created another family, separate from my family, assuming that we are married. That is cheating. Now, I hope you understand I haven't referred to one important statement: sex. Again, this is not a moral conversation. This is amoral. If he has sex with another woman, and I do so, or he does so, without any intimacy, without any emotion being invested, possibly in an agnostic way, that is not cheating. Let me say that again, and I'll explain why. I meet a woman who's different to my wife. I fall in love with her, but we haven't had any intimacy or sex. The fact that I've connected my emotions to her means I've split my energy across two women. That is cheating. If I take it a step further and I'm willing to die for her, just as I'm willing to die for you, based on the love and based on that act being a profession, a way I profess that love to you, that is cheating. If I were to meet a woman and I was happy to provide provision for her, whether that be a lovely flat in the city centre, a house somewhere, provide for her family, provide her money indirectly to support those she loves, without your knowledge and approval, I'm now given provision as I am providing for you, that is cheating. Provision, protection, given to another woman, that is cheating. On the priestly side, as a priesthood, if I were to share our vision, or my vision, which I shared with you at the start, my dreams, my goals, my purpose, my steps, my plan, such that she binds and bonds with that vision and unite with that vision, just as you united with my vision, and she sees herself in that future, and I see her in that future, just as I see you in that future, that is cheating. If we then become intimate, but it's sexual only, and it's a one-night stand, two-night stand, or perhaps it could be a regular thing, but if I found that she died tomorrow and I lose no sleep, or I say, well, shit happens. In other words, I'm not invested emotionally in her or with her. My soul is not with her. We haven't pair bonded from a man's perspective, despite we having sex. That is not cheating from a man's perspective, and I will explain why. If I were to gift her my presence, again, a man professes his love through his presence. But if I were to give her my presence to the same extent that I give you my presence, that is cheating. But if it's, well, we meet every now and then, once a week, once an hour every day, but it's purely sexual, that is not cheating, because I'm not gifting you my presence. And here's the key part of that conversation. My presence, by giving you my presence, where the heart is, that's where the treasure is also. It means that I'm also giving you my secrets. Now, Samson would never have been killed had he maintained his charge as a prophet. The reason Samson was eventually killed, having been blinded, was because he gifted a woman who he should not have been bonded with. He gifted her his presence and, unfortunately, his secrets. That's the key thing. A woman that understands your secrets. Those down you, the man, and your wife. That is cheating. Now, the reason I didn't use sex as cheating is as follows. Men are animals. We're an extension of the animal kingdom. We're mammals. When you see a pack of lions walk into a new village with female lions, even if it's six lions, male lions, or 2 male lions, or even 1 male lion, when you see him hump all the other women, he can hump all of them and walk away and never look back. We don't call that cheating. We just simply say, well, that's part of their nature. Now, I'm not suggesting that cheating or sexual activity is part of every man's nature. I'm simply saying that a man's desire for sex cannot be satiated by one woman and one woman only. In the West, women have been told and brainwashed to thinking that you have this golden gift between your legs and that it will satisfy him for eternity. It cannot. It will not. So disavow yourself of the position that what is between your legs will be good enough to keep him faithful. Now, I have said in many sessions, many sessions ago, it's not what you have between your legs that keeps him faithful. More so, it's not what's between your legs that keeps him coming home. It's his conscience, which is connected to his character and his words and promises, but also your words and your attitude. He comes home to your words because that's a place of peace. Sex, from a man's perspective, is not cheating. Now, it could be wrong. I'm not saying it's not right or wrong. It could be wrong. But when men have sex, we do so usually without emotion. Now, women that I have met and have had conversations with struggle to understand this. Ejaculation for a man is like taking a piss. It's like urination. We don't think about it. If you asked me, what was the feeling of the last time you went to the bathroom, just before this session started, what did it feel like? Was it fun? I don't know. Just in the same way, I cannot tell you how it felt like when I walked into the beautiful hotel that I was in at 2 days ago. I cannot tell you what the bathroom felt like. Why? Because I don't think about that. We don't think like that. We have no emotions, generally, when we have sex. In pursuit of sex, we have a desire. In the act of sex, we have a release. Post-sex, we have no memory. We have amnesia, which is partly why a man can have the most attractive woman as a wife, as a girlfriend, have sex with her at 9 a.m. before he leaves for work, travels to work, walks into the office, sees his secretary, and wants to fuck her. 1 hour after he's actually been in bed with his gorgeous wife. The secretary perhaps is a 5, an average woman. His wife or missus is a 9. And women cannot understand why. Well, men cannot explain why. We are animals. There is something. She's not as attractive as you, but a man's desire for sex cannot be satiated, all things remaining equal. So we can have sex with multiple sex partners and apply no emotions to it. For us, it's just sex. We forget the moment it stops, which is why we can go back to the same party for more sex, because we can't remember. Women, on the other hand, cannot have sex with another man if they are in love with one man without actually having their emotions getting involved. Men, on the other hand, we can love a woman and have sex with multiple women and have no feelings for all those women. As a matter of fact, they can die in our eyes in front of us post-sex, and we don't give an F. We go back to our wives because that's where our heart is. It is cheating when he deposits his heart with the next woman in the act of sex. So, as a woman and as a modern woman, if you can distinguish some of the things, as irritating as it may have sounded, as jarring as it may have felt, but if you can separate some of these issues, the key point of today's session is as follows. Most women do not understand the psyche of men. Most women do not understand how men think, who we are. No effort is placed in women to get to know what men are all about. The first time women generally play with men is foreplay. Women who have played with men, either in clubs, societies, athletics, etc., understand men enough to say, do you know what? He's coming back home to me. That's the most important thing. Does he come back to me? Has he broken his word? Has he given away his heart? Does he leave his heart somewhere else? Is he providing the resources to another woman or to other women? If he is not doing any of that, if he's purely physical, be like a bumblebee, be intelligently ignorant. Don't go looking. If you ask, you will find. Ask and you will find. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open unto you. In the sessions that follow, maybe the session that I do next time, I'm going to talk about infidelity, cheating, and more. And I'm going to try and piece together what I call the asymmetry of value. And I think in the West, the fundamental disagreement women will have with what I've shared is because women do not understand, modern women do not understand the asymmetry of value in a dating or relationship marketplace, but most importantly, the value proposition that both parties bring to the table. Women who see men as equal, or who believe men and women are equal, will believe that this is a moral position, and that if she's not supposed to cheat because her emotions are involved, then you are not supposed to cheat, even though your emotions are not involved. That lack of understanding of what the opposite sex wants and who we are causes confusion, but most importantly, creates most of the destruction of good relationships. Now, this is not to suggest that I'm saying he should be running around town and sticking his pee in every woman he sees. No, there are rules. Again, we'll go back to his words. There are rules. And a wise woman is one who's able to sit down with a man and have a conversation about what rules are acceptable, what will be tolerated, but most importantly, to get him to speak in his own words. The vow doesn't make provision for infidelity or cheating. Don't use the vow or the promise or the poem you wrote for each other. Don't use that as a guiding stick, his words. And it comes through negotiation. You have to be able to sit down as adults and talk about these issues. But most importantly, here is perhaps an overriding recommendation to women. If the man is 35 and below, it doesn't matter what he tells you with his words. He will fall short of his promises, guaranteed. The reason simply being, remember, the test for power, the test for wealth, and the test of his loins or sex. At 35 and below, a man's value, his economic intrinsic value, which you can demonstrate in several ways: money, power, influence, fame, connectivity, network, has not been developed the younger he is. It's much less than it will be at 35 and above. When a man gets to 35 and above, he can generally afford what he wants. He is more desirable to more women. Therefore, his options, his opportunities is much more advanced, and therefore his tests and temptations and what he overcomes are more concrete. A boy who is 25 cannot talk about actually being tested. He hasn't. His character is not developed. Whereas the man who's 38 can say, well, I've had the opportunity to say no, and I've had the opportunity to say yes, but I've done both from a place of power, from a place of abundance, and from a place of choice. The younger he is, he doesn't have the authority, he doesn't have the abundance, and sometimes he doesn't really have much choice. So when men say to women, well, I haven't cheated on you, or I haven't actually had any sexual encounter with other women, don't believe that statement, although it could be true. That statement should be qualified as follows. Have you had the opportunities? Do you have the leverage? Do you have the societal, social class? Are you attractive to other women? And therefore, have you overcome the temptations that have come with that prestige you have, and you've turned down every single opportunity? Because, for example, men who do not get opportunities have nothing to lose. They cannot say that they have been tested. Just like men who cannot afford beautiful women cannot say that they will not have sexual encounters with a beautiful woman. The key point is as follows. Irrespective of the man you're dating, I always test women, give them this useful example. Look at the man you're dating and ask yourself a simple question. If you were to say to him, listen, I'm going to give you a house, a townhouse, a Georgian townhouse in Mayfair, 6-bedroom Georgian townhouse, and you have 2 dedicated parking places in front of the house. On one, you can park your Aston Martin, whatever model you want, and on the other, you have a Rolls Royce. In your bank account every month, there will be perhaps something in the region of close to 7 figures deposited in your account every month, for which at the end of the month is replenished. So if we say £1 million every month, whether you spend all of it or none of it, you get another £1 million. And he can live whatever life he wants. In other words, he has the ability to afford whatever he wishes, which makes him very attractive to the opposite sex, much desirable to the opposite sex. He therefore has money, and at that level of wealth, you will always have power because you have access to people who have power, or you can buy power in whatever way you want, and therefore you can also afford to have beautiful women around you. That description, the simple question is as follows. If you were to give him all of those, would he turn down every opportunity from women who are very attractive, as he would currently? And the answer is, with most men, the answer is no. Now, this even goes even worse, because you can say to most men, if you had all of this, would he even choose you as a spouse today? Or would he have chosen you based on who you would have been back in the past and who he is currently today? So you met at 25 and you're 35, both of you today. Fine. At 35, we keep him at 35. We give him everything he needs. And we say, we take you back to 25 and we ask a simple question. Would he have chosen you? Most men would say no, if they're being very honest. And question 2, even if he chose you at 35, does he find you as desirable as all the other women who are around him, who are competing for his time and attention? Most men will say no. Now, the point of all of this is to say, a woman, you have to be more strategic and intelligent the older you get. And here is perhaps I end with a few sentences that may not seem to be politically correct. As a woman ages, unfortunately, you have less of what men want: beauty, youth, chastity, fertility, and attractiveness. Men have the same problem, by the way, but men are visual. So as you age, you have less of what men generally want. So at 40, you cannot compete with your 21-year-old self, all things remaining equal. Now let me use this last example to end today's session. Now we understand about one of our politicians, Matt Hancock, sometime over the past 18 months, when it was announced that he was having an affair and he was splitting with his wife, Martha, who he had been married to for about 15 years, and he had 3 kids because Matt was having an affair. Great example. Here was a problem. Matt was clearly having an affair. For me, it's not a value judgment. It's also immoral. But based on my standards, why? Here's the key thing. It wasn't that he was seeing Gina, his mistress. It was that he said he was in love with Gina whilst being married. That's an affair. That's cheating. That's infidelity, and that's wrong. His emotions were invested. So Gina understood his vision, understood his purpose, understood his drives and dreams, and was a supporter. She was a helpmeet. So he had created 2 helpmeets, his wife and another woman. Unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. Now, had he been sexually intimate with Gina, but not in love with Gina, such that at the point when it was announced, he would have said to Gina, we're done. My family is more important. My wife is more important. My unit is preeminent. And you were just a side piece. We're done. Had he taken that position, then we would simply say, well, perhaps he could have done it more with more decorum, but it was simply a sexual activity or encounter. Instead, he invested his emotions. He provided for her. He provided protection with his presence. He gifted her with his presence just as much as he did his wife. And he was revealing and sharing his future plans, even more so than his wife. That was cheating. That was wrong. Now, in the sessions to follow, I will talk about the strategically intelligent thing to do as a woman. When you find yourself with a man who is having sexual encounters with another woman, which you disapprove of, but also what to do when you are already married. It requires strategic decision making. Martha was in my opinion, despite Matt Hancock's position about being in love, she made a mistake. You don't break up your family because a man is behaving like a fool. You have to learn to speak to the kid in the man or the kid in the king when the king is acting a fool. That's your role as a woman. You have to rise up to know, no, I'm not speaking to the king. I'm speaking to a drunk fool. This is a kid. I'm going to deal with this kid without behaving like a child myself. And I will wait and I will speak to the king in the kid whilst the kid is misbehaving so that I can remind him of his words, his promises, or his vows. And I can remind him of himself. Because a lot of the time, men, we forget who we really are. And often a woman's words, like most women think men cheat because of sexual desires only. No, most of the time when men cheat, men do so because the woman we are with has become complacent in knowing how to speak life into us. So when a man starts to cheat and he goes beyond just pure sex and he starts to spend time with her, she's providing something his main girl, main wife, main spouse does not provide. Whether that be encouragement, serenity, whether that be silence, peace, whether that be through her attitude, servanthood, she's providing something that you have neglected. In closing, a young man at age 4, sometimes 3, is introduced to a football team by his father. He didn't choose the football team. He saw his father talk about football. The father took him to the football games, and he decides, well, I'm an Arsenal fan. 70 years later, he's still an Arsenal fan. Men can be very loyal. We don't leave things that easily. Sometimes we do, but we generally do not. The point being, every woman can work with that loyal boy who chose a team, in this case you. He chose to be a team with you, and recognize that even when he starts to misbehave, you need to be more strategic, intelligent, smart, and put aside, especially modern women, put aside the pressure that comes from other women, all the feminists, womanists, who tell you you're better off being alone. Why should he embarrass you, disgrace you, and therefore you destroy your family because of your ego, without understanding you were dealing with an animal, and his behavior was no different from a lion, or a gorilla, a chimpanzee. And if you're like a bumblebee and you're intelligently ignorant, and if you're able to separate sex, intimacy, affection, and recognize that perhaps he did not break the conversation. Now, in my opinion, let me just say this before I close. A man's word is important, so I usually encourage men, sit down and discuss everything. And in advance, even during the in-love phase, talk about everything. Because a time will come when you come to your Garden of Gethsemane and you will find yourself struggling. But what will hold you from doing something wrong could be your words, your promises, those things you spoke. Now, I hope that's been useful. I am going to stop now, and perhaps in the next section, I'm going to try and piece together the whole concept of infidelity, cheating, and more. Anyway, until next time, it's been a pleasure.